everybody. Welcome this evening. We're really happy for you to join us here tonight. Thank you to Fold and Charlie and Carolina for having us. I'm really excited to be speaking to Claudia Hart for this talk, The Poetics of Spaces In-Between, Augmented App and Web VR as Artistic Non-Sites. My name is Zaiba Jabbar. I'm a curator, award-winning director and founder of HERVISIONS. HERVISIONS is a multidisciplinary, femme-focused curatorial agency and platform supporting and promoting gender minorities working in the intersections of art, technology and culture. I'm specifically interested in the democratization of art existing outside the white cube, and my curatorial practice, HERVISIONS, is an investigation into how people in the margins are using technology to create art outside traditional contexts and making space for themselves in the digital environment. I'm really pleased to be speaking to the amazing Claudia Hart. So Claudia Hart, hi, how are you doing? Lovely to see you in here. I just wanted to
hang out with your man-eating plant self.
I know. I'm loving your floating entity. I'm just going to give the audience a bit of a introduction to you. So you emerged as part of a generation of 90s intermediate artists in the identity art context. And you still examine issues of identity, now focusing on how technology affects cultural constructions of gender identities and issues of the body, perception and nature collapsing into technology and then back again. You were an early adopter of virtual imaging, using 3D animation to make media installations and projections. Then later, as they were invented, other forms of VR and AR and objects using computer-driven production machines. You're at the School of Art Institute of Chicago. You developed a pedagogic program based on this concept, which was experimental 3D, and the first program was dedicated solely to teaching simulations technologies in an art world context. And you're occasionally a curator and art historian as well, focusing on simulations. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased to be here with you. I know this evening we're going to be talking about two projects specifically, the Romantic App and the Ruins. And they're both kind of liminal spaces function in the interstices between the sort of real world and digital processing, as particular kinds of spaces with unique qualities and embedded structural meaning. So I would love to pass this over to you, and we can start by you discussing or talking us through a little bit about the project, the Romantic App, which you developed with your students. I know you're going to be sharing your screen, is that right?
Yes, but before I do that, I want to give a nod to why we have a lot to talk about, and also the idea of liminality. So I was actually trained to be an architect, and I soon did not do that. I got involved in simulations technology, I think it's 24 years ago. And at that point, it was startlingly misogynistic in a way that I had never experienced in my life, because it was a Department of Defense area of research, and people involved in early gaming, commercial, which is or even 3D animation, the world of Pixar, usually had come out of the army and a kind of homosocial, incredibly, mind-blowingly misogynistic kind of environment. And most of the stuff that was being done was porn. So I was very, very drawn to the medium, which is a liminal medium. It's a very overused word, but I was forced by this world that I was in to take a very head-on approach to feminism. Everything I did was colored by that. It was inescapable. It was a kind of pressure that was being put on me. So from the very beginning, I, embraced a strongly feminist practice, and a lot of what I did was to challenge this kind of environment that I was in, and I was very interested in female identity and asking myself what that meant, and then and that meant to me a kind of fluidity, cultural tropes for the female, right? Cultural tropes for the natural had to do with fluidity. And also I embraced from early the idea of a queering of everything. I was a fan of Donna Haraway because this was the opposite of the rigidity and the polarizing environment of extremely macho, militaristic simulations culture. So this idea of fluidity and liminality was in itself for me a kind of feminist action, just cultivating that environment. So my avatar. Yeah,
sorry. Well, no, I love the sort of sensuality of your work, but also that that it's not pornographic, and like you're saying, kind of using these digital mediums to subvert these sort of early sort of dichotomies of women and how they're presented in these, I guess, kind of like very sort of fundamentally scientific kind of beginnings, or like technology, sorry, not scientific, but like technology beginnings or mediums, and then for artistic kind of purpose, I think is really fascinating. And I think like that kind of like empowered use of technology and subversion of technology is what's really exciting about your work.
Yes, and I think this sort of idea of fluid space, a space that's poetic, a space that is emotive, are all themselves paradigms of non-rigid, logocentric, hierarchical, militaristic kind of culture that this stuff was embedded in. So I was very, very drawn to constructing spaces that could hybridize real world with virtual world. Because this is the ultimate liminality from an anthropological sense, a space in between.
So I think that entanglement is really vital, I think.
Yeah, so the two projects we are talking about are projects where that is really the case. And before I pop on the romantic app, both the thing about this space that we are in, which is a Mozilla Hubs version of The Ruins, which is a real-life exhibition that is in New York right now, in the Lower East Side and Bitforms Gallery. The fact that it is real, even if London can't see it, is a kind of promise. The fact that we know that it exists in the ether and on Earth. And I think as I've worked with these kind of mediums now for 25 years, including when they were invented, augmented reality, which is why we're going to start with the augmented project that I've done with students over the past 6 or 7 years, the romantic app, because augmented mixed the real world with the fake world simultaneously. So, and also the fact that I was in the Ars Electronica Festival this year, and they were working on the idea of remote sites, and the fact that they wanted to do something in Bitforms Gallery based on video, but there were also some people doing Hubs projects, and the idea that I was going to make a scale model copy of this thing on Earth, I think is sort of why it's particularly fun for people to do it. So throughout this talk, I'm going to show pictures of the real thing and the different mediums, because that's why it's magical, I think. even if that thing doesn't exist anymore, it exists as a fluid in between space. So are you ready? Do you want to tell me something, or should we just pop in? I'm going to share. I can share. I'm going to share a application. And now we're going to have a moment of infinite regress, which is nice. Ooh, I love that. That's very liminal. Can you see it?
Yeah. Can I just give, for those of you, for the people at home that are watching who don't know what they're too much about the Romantic app, I'll just say that it's a custom augmented reality application made for smartphones or tablets, especially for the 18th and 19th century paintings of the European Painting and Sculpture Wing in the Art Institute of Chicago. It was a class project which Claudia mentioned, created in conversation with European Painting and Sculpture Chair Gloria Groom and her curating staff, and it was supported with research associate Alison Perelman and collections manager Devon Lee Pyle-Vowles. And the Art Institute students designed and executed the app in the fall of semester of 2015. So you're going to have a little.
Can you see are we sharing
through? Yeah, I can see.
All right, so cool. I want to start with the Romantic app because, as I said, it was an earlier iteration of the ability to literally mix realities. When you look at regular VR, you're actually by yourself inside of a headset. And I found when you're working with augmented reality, where you're in the real world, even though you're looking through a smart device, which is sort of ridiculously tiny, a phone or a little tablet, the fact that you actually are in a physical world and are seeing a mixed reality object, in this case, painting, gives people a sense of delight. It's sort of amazing to me, even now that we all are more familiar with augmented reality, that they get very excited and sort of giggling and very jump up and down kind of thing. So I'm just scrolling through here, and I'm going to start by saying that I did this project I started with a real world in the modern wing, and that's very important. There are two wings in the Art Institute. One of them is the older wing, European Painting and Sculpture, and they have a very famous collection of pre-impressionism, impressionism, and post-impressionism. And in the modern wing is also a permanent, amazing collection of modernist painting. And I started in a Magritte show, which, without asking permission, being sort of naive about what this might mean. And we did, there was a traveling Matisse show, and we made an app on top of it. I was interested in Matisse because it dealt with perceptions of the real, the difference between language and image. And I felt that simulations technology, because my classes teach 3D animation, they teach augmented reality, and now they teach VR. It started only as 3D because there was just 3D that we could access. And the simulations technologies are based on simulating real things on data. So I want to say that this idea, wait, let me step back because I'm getting ahead of myself. We did a Magritte show. We tested it in the real world. The audience, meaning all the people who were there, the viewers, and also the guards of the museum, were very delighted. There was a lot of excitement in the museum with people running around from other rooms and guards coming from other wings because they wanted to see it and know how it worked. And I got the first taste of how people get sort of hysterical about this stuff. And and I then was told that I couldn't do it. I could not come back in the museum, and we couldn't work with that app in public. And why this was that it was a copyright infringement. The museum at that point was actually getting sued by the Magritte family, who had given permission to show the paintings, but not to make the invitation card. And they had accidentally not gotten permission and made a card and were being sued. The curator was rightly anxious that the app itself might be a copyright infringement. It actually isn't true, because the trackables, meaning the little copies, JPEG copies of paintings that you use to be what's called a trackable in Augmented, are so tiny that they don't, and you can also shoot them right off the wall with your camera. It doesn't require, it's a legal reproduction, as tourists are allowed to make in a museum. But nevertheless, there was a lot of fear about this. At that point, the director, now director of the entire older wing of European painting and sculpture, was then a chief curator, and she said, "Why don't you come and make an app with my paintings? They're all public domain." And I think this idea that it was copyright free was a key thing about the ruins and a lot of the work that I have done since then, as I have been very involved with also helping the museum, helping Gloria develop language and make a presentation to her then boss. This was like, at least 7 years ago, to get permission to put all the public domain artworks of the museum online and high resolution, which at the Art Institute was not being done. But for example, at the Tate had been done for many years. There's a Matisse with the animation on top of it that the student made. In the Tate or the Met, this had been done for years. So we started working with these old Impressionist pre and post paintings. And I found, and this is what you do, the painting itself becomes what's called a trackable, and the students make an animation that can integrate the actual painting with real stuff. So here the student put in this moving frying pan, sizzling, and that's the actual Matisse. When you look at it, this is a simulation of what you see, because when you actually look at the painting, you see the real Matisse with her stuff integrated. And it has a trompe-l'oeil effect. And this one is Jared Solomon. Oh, wait, did I overlook her name? Oops. My thing is going. That was Sharon Pack, this one. Here, Jared made a piece that actually color mixes. He was interested in how curators work. And this is Monet's. And he made an app where you could colors that matched in either painting jumped across and made a line of connection. And this is what you would see when you looked at the paintings. And I want to go down and see. Here's one where the student was very interested in gaming culture and found all these green screen figures that came from commercial games and integrated them into these sort of early romantic or right before Impressionism. This was landscapes. So they were doing things like this. And wait, let's see. There's one that's more political, which was Gauguin. Oh, we don't see the animation, but this was actual Gauguin's 14-year-old bride. And he was, the student was like implying that this was, fetishizing little girls, which it actually was. And integrated these ice cream cones that actually bob up and down and are animated. And he inserted her portrait. So they were doing all kinds of interesting things with this. One of the things that I want to say that is, here's one where it's gaming on a Monet, and the Monet was specifically, and shooting And Monet was actually, making comments about warfare at that point too. So here's one where it's a landscape painting software from Daniel Brookman. So it was a cheap, popular software where people could make their own landscapes. So he used it to recreate, I guess this is Monet. And, you would look at the Monet and then you would get a slightly animated version from this mass market software of Monet. So they were playing around in interesting ways. One of the things what's these? One of the things that I wanted, I asked them to do that was so important, I felt, was to also think about photography. Here's another version of the Romantic app from another year. In other words, I was saying to them, you are young people at a pivotal point in art history. Here's one where we have sort of Warholian. That was the same one where the other student put a horse running through. So this is like Warhol soup cans and this guy. His own mythological thing. So I asked them to think about photography because the Impressionism was a bunch of artists at that point who were influenced tremendously by that photography and were changing their ideas of representation in relation to photography. So and I told them, here you are on the cusp of another point where computer is replacing photography. Photography, simulated images are replacing photography. You are also standing on a paradigm shift, and please think about that as you make these things. The students expressed a lot of anxiety to me about that issue. So I'm going to stop sharing screens for a minute here, if I can. Are we stuck? I'm coming back.
I guess also because I think this thing about post photography that so visual language and post photography and how that sort of connects to obviously the copyright infringements that you've talked about.
Yeah, so let's go back, Zaiba, and look at the first picture in the lobby before, you know what I mean? And I'll look at mine.
Yeah.
So like this one, the orange lady.
Yeah, so I'm going to become an avatar now.
Yeah, let's get rid of our...
So we're portaling into our avatar states now.
Yes, and let's stand in this lobby and stand in front of the.
Oh,
that's okay.
Hi,
come
Claudia.
towards me. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can. Oh, it's so nice to be at one with my body again.
Not easy. It's never easy to be at one with your body.
It really isn't, but I'm trying again in here.
All right, wait, can you see me? I can see you.
Yeah, I'm going to turn around and we're going to have a look at them. Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for talking through your project, the Romantic app, and as we're talking about both of these projects exploring sort of obviously liminality, which is something we know is key to your work, and also these using augmented reality and web-based sites. I'm really excited to be here in this virtual version of the ruins, which is also in New York, IRL as well. And so I wanted to, I guess we're here standing in front of this first piece of work, which I'd love you to talk us through.
All right, so we were talking about copyright and we were talking about photography, and how I would say to my students, you are standing in a paradigm shift. And one of, and this is itself profound, an artist looking at another moment, which was a paradigm shift, and trying to think about similar things, and then what happens with the results. So as my students were all working with the collection and for the Romantic app, I got actually sort of jealous of them because it seemed like such a nice thing to do. I wanted to do it too. And in the last semester, I've done this every spring semester since forever. I think it's 7 years by now. They were all doing still lives. They were very fascinated by the idea of the still life as a memento mori, and that using a still life itself was a statement about paradigm shift, and that they wanted to intervene on the still lives as they had existed, and make a contemporary version using things like glitching and all kinds of formal strategies that weren't possible previously. So I, at that point, thought, okay, I'm doing it too. And I started to do demos and classes of still lives to teach them things. And that was the beginning of a new phase in my own work. This was the beginning, it wasn't the beginning, it was the middle of Trump land, where discourse and public discussion in the United States had become very brutal and aggressive and mean-spirited and noisy. And I felt like I couldn't take it. And I started to feel that art should be creating a space of serious thought and calming down and contemplation and repose, to think about the mess of the world and how we might change it. So I got very interested in making still lives, and I was particularly interested in Matisse, and I will tell you why. Because one of my students in this past semester, that was this past spring, who was also interested in still lives, because we're another year into Trump, into this, horror of the Trump's America. Before COVID hit, I started working on the still lives, and my students all seemed to want to do that. I think it was an intuitive response to this kind of very noisy and aggressive space, their desire to make something that was a space of meditation. So one of them was particularly interested in Matisse, and she noticed that there was only one Matisse in the old wing, and all the rest of them were in the modern wing. And she wanted to use some of the paintings in the modern wing, and I said, no, we are not allowed to use the modern wing. That held true from the Matisse show, from the Magritte show that we had done at this point, it's 7 years ago. We could not go in the modern wing because everything there was copyright protected, and public domain was the area before in Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, etc. So when we asked Gloria, why is all the Matisse, Gloria Groom, who's the now director-in-chief of the whole thing, why is Matisse only one of them in your wing? He's a post-impressionist. He belongs with all the other ones. Why is he in the modern wing? And she said, well, that's a bone of contention, both in this museum and every museum that has old and modern wings, the larger museums, because Matisse is actually copyright protected. So he is usually put in modernism. His work was really halfway in between, right? It's not even as purely abstract as Picasso, who was usually, you would think, the start of the modern wing, and is more abstracted. But Matisse was the beginning of copyright protected paintings. And he also stood at this juncture where he felt liberated from the task of representation, which was a job taken up by photography, and began this flattening and unnatural colors, and stopped caring that much about verisimilitude. So I found that really interesting, and I wanted to make I work with virtual reality, which is a dome-like space. It uses calculus, it's XYZ. I wanted to go towards flattening because it was almost impossible to do it. It is very hard to flatten things in a XYZ space. And I was interested in this perceptual game that I could play. So I started with these, and this one is the beginning, where I looked at Matisse's series of red paintings, and I put myself in, and there I'm holding the book, which has one of his paintings, and everything is animated, moving at slightly different rates. And I took it upon myself, and this was before COVID, to work with the Matisses. So you want to go into the big room, and we can look at the other stuff? I'm going to zoom in.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, let me follow you in. You've also kind of named these rooms different colors for different
Yes,
themes.
that's true.
Each room, each of the themes. Is there some?
Come on in. We're in the big room now, Zaiba. Come on in.
Here we go.
Hello.
Yay!
Hi.
Hi.
So let's start by looking at these ones. Yeah. These ones, like you just said, they're named after colors. And Matisse used primary colors, so I'm using secondary colors. So he, had the blue table, I have the green table. I have, I did call one big red. The other one is the orange room instead of the red room. So, Harmony in Red, it was called. So mine is the orange room. And so it was a move on that. And I was also interested in setting up these using simulated data. So I took all the data for the way these specific plants moved. I abstracted them. I flattened the space. I made these animated noises because I was thinking about flows of time and history, and having the noises sort of as decorative wallpapers and moving slowly and using calculatably correct physics of the movement of certain kinds of plants in
so
atmosphere.
Beautiful.
And creating this sort of mesmerizing space. So
there's something very like underwater like about the sort of rate or speed, and I just wonder if there's any sort of parallels that you're sort of like drawing on, obviously, with this kind of like the poor image, or like the sort of like the replicated image in relation to these low poly and simulated sort of pieces of work, and how that kind of, I just wondered if there was something there that you'd kind of thought about or connected to.
Yes, absolutely. The discourse about reproduction, copyright, and art and authenticity, and what is real art and not real art continued. And while I had made these other ones, the vertical paintings, which are unique and one of a kind, and thinking about painting and making a contemplative space. And I will tell you that I'll in a little bit, I'll show photographs of the real one. And this is actually a sculpture that exists in the real world, but doesn't really look like this. It's actually high resolution. People come into I have the keys to the gallery, and I often meet people in there and we sit in the floor drinking wine for like an evening because it's such a chill environment, you know, because of what you were saying about all the different rates and the simplified imagery and all that, and the clicking talk, talking click, clicking clock, ticking clock. Aha.
But I get, and also these kind of expressions of like, you know, regeneration through this like cycle of decay or kind of like time that you're sort of toying with, I think kind of, you know, shifts us into this like more meditative kind of sort of fluidity. And I guess that's something again that comes back to your practice.
Yes, totally. And the fluid noises. So yes, so now I'm leaving them behind and particularly addressing the 3-channel piece that is behind you. And I am now facing. And when you were asking, Zaiba, about the relationship to the poor image, that is a super appropriate question, and it's also related to my teaching practice because in all of those classes, I teach Hito Sterol's famous essay on the poor image, and that and her discussion about not low polygon models, but low resolution images, and how artists are able to appropriate very low pixel images, like what I actually do when we make an augmented app is we don't use high resolution, we use very low resolution, not copyright infringible, and how artists can dip into that and in remix culture that exists now, smush together and make other creations, and the world of imagery is opened up, and it's a kind of way of writing over history. And so when COVID actually happened, the galleries shut down, and I was concerned, as was Steve, that we might not be able to have a show in real life. And there was a game on an article on a game called Occupy White Walls, and it's like a gallery building game that actually comes out of Britain. And the game is what they did was actually appropriate all the public domain images, which Gloria and I had made available of the art institutes, and also the Tate and the Met, who have all of, as I said earlier, have all loaded these beautiful high-resolution images of their public domain art. And Yarden Yavlovsky is the owner of this Occupy White Walls. He has about 60,000 players at this point. And what you can do in there is you can model a nifty gallery in any style you want. You don't with parts that he provides, and then you can curate shows and offer them for sale. You can have the Mona Lisa, you can have a Cézanne, anything that's public domain, and it has an avid following. But Steve showed him my work, and he said, "Oh, I'd like to do a project with her." And I met him on Zoom, and he said, "I want to do a project with you because my players would love to have Cézanne. Matisse, and I can't get Matisse. He's copyright protected, but I can get you. So would you like to do a show in there?" And combining that with the story I just told about Hito's ideas about low resolution, it popped into my head, a show. I can do low resolution polygon models of Cézanne of Matisse, and I added Picasso, right? So I could actually infringe on the copyright. It was a flirtatious idea of copyright infringement and also a forgery, because I was trying to... so that I thought, oh, great, I'm going to take these two patriarchs, the two white patriarch masters, and I will copy them as much as I can, matching their brush strokes and their colors. And I'm going to paint them on a low-res polygon model because games have limited processing power. And we're on Mozilla Hubs, which is social VR in its early stages of development. It's streaming on the internet, and we cannot have detail in there. It has to be very low calculus objects. So I set out to copy these, and I went bonkers. I got so much of a kick out of, forging them, and I was, and these like a girlfriend of mine. I told her, I'm bringing them down. She pointed out that I'd said that, like, Matisse and Picasso, I'm going to bring them down to size. And that was my fantasy. So I built this model, and it's a labyrinth, very complicated one with one entry, with the idea that I was going to take all these models and also my Matisses, and also in the past year or 2 years, really, when I started doing still lifes, I got a lot of, because they're populist and they're very available for regular people to appreciate. They're not so highly coded as a lot of work in the art world is, that it's hard for regular folks to enter. And I got a lot of commissions and for doing editions with these things, which there you see a Cézanne in the middle screen. That's a Matisse on the left. Interpretations of these paintings, and I was so thrilled to do it. And they give you $2,000, and then you give your to do an edition, of which very few ever sell, and then you give your copyright away for 10 years. I realized that I had signed away. Here I was obsessing about copyright infringement, and I myself had given it all away for nothing. So I decided to bring them all in there. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, where are you?
No, I'm here. Hi, Claudia. I think like it's like so great to hear you talk about this sort of journey from the sort of the hallucinatory sort of effects of augmented reality in the romantic cap, and then how we're seeing this kind of flattening of these kind of like virtualities or simulations that are repurposed into another simulated environment. And then you sort of subvert that again with the wallpaper, which is behind these pieces and behind you at the moment. And I just wondered if you could maybe talk a little bit about that.
All right, that's good. But and then I want to also talk about the audio. So let's do it all.
Yes, great. Yeah, I'd love to hear, because there's some gorgeous kind of very, as I would say, slightly not necessarily disturbing, but I feel like at ease with these sounds. But they are. I would love to know a bit more about how they were created, because I know that's another whole collaborative piece of work that we can talk about.
Well, I might add, the reason we've sort of skipped it out is that this is not real, what you are all saying. Actually, Zaiba is not a plant. Oh, well, you know that, because it's real us. That's why we brought in the real us in the beginning. But
don't rain on my parade, Claudia.
I don't want to reveal your secret. Yeah, the real Zaiba is the plant, and the person in the video is the fake. So,
that's the simulation for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't think I'm a ghost, because I'm basically too extroverted to be that. But I'm opening up. So the reason we're bringing up.
So do you want to talk a little bit about the sound bit or the wallpaper? Because I do find how you're subverting all of these.
I want to do both.
Okay.
Because we'll start we can end up with the sound, but the reason we left out the sound, and we oversighted this in our discussion so far, is that, of course, we will put this together with the magic of nonlinear editing, another artificial reality, and we took the sound out so that we wouldn't get feedback, and we will add the sound later. So you can hear the sound, the audience, but Zaiba and I cannot hear the sound. So you started by asking about the wallpaper, so I'm going to start with the wallpaper, and I'm going to go to Vimeo now, so I'm going to go back to the recursive experience of sharing my application, which starts as an infinite regress. And there, I'm gonna make it a little bigger. And now I'm going to share this. So the wallpaper is also, is this, Zaiba, do you see this?
I'm having a quick look around. Yes, can see this now.
All right, so part of the piece, each of the paintings go with wallpaper. The wallpaper is an extension of the piece. If you're in the real space, you can have either upload a Blip AR public app and see exactly this, or I also have a custom augmented app, and we hand out tablets so that people can see embedded into the wallpaper another layer of mixed reality. So this one goes with the 3-channel ruins. So this is, and so part of that is this animation where you have these flows, the fluid flows of time or history, because this is a lot about that collapse of history. And the no is no, Trumplandia, no more, please. And the direct message, transcend the pain of being, because if you're in America, it's really not fun. So that was one, and that's part of the piece. And then let's go back. Where's my video?
Can I just add that you hand painted these the wallpaper in the Royal Gallery.
That is a really that's important. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
I was just curious to find out a little bit more about why you felt that was an integral part of the piece, in terms of this sort of activation through through an app and technology, and why it was important for you to kind of sort of start or kind of activate that piece with the hand-painted.
Well, first of all, I think part of the power of art is its symbolic power. So people are receptive to art itself is liminal. It's a kind of halfway space between real and unreal. And so a lot of it's like alchemy. It is alchemy, art itself. And so the enactment, performative gestures that happen within virtual space, and I'm also involved with experimental theater and dance, in which I use mixed reality and avatars performing live music who are streamed into virtual environments and doing things like that. What I have found is that this alchemy itself, which is the potential of art, makes people very receptive to it. And that's where it gets its power. So when I made these wallpapers, you're looking at one now where you see these animations, which I'll run for a minute.
But so I also find that comes down to this sort of the materiality of of what you're doing, because actually working in the digital space and also within these within these simulated environments, there's this like real desire to, and again this kind of connects back, I guess, to like this sort of post photography that you've been that has really influenced your practice as well, and the sort of the reproduction of images, and how that kind of is actually given, I guess, it's almost like tying in the works to, this, or cementing it into sort of the real world, obviously, but also into the connections with digital, and also I think feminism as well, and how sort of we're having to exist in parallel for many reasons, I guess.
Exactly, like the fluid spaces. So your first thing was about the gesture of, so when I make the wallpapers, I set up a kind of easel. I make a painting. So I actually start with canvas, believe it or not. It's like some psychological thing. So I take a picture, a JPEG of blank canvas. I make a support. And then within Maya, which is my 3D software, I use a paint tool that simulates paint and has a lot of fluidity to it. So it's not, it sort of runs a little bit and blends in a way that you can't do in Photoshop. And I actually like painted on the canvas freehand. And because I feel like my body is in there, because in 3D software, it's just like here where we look through our robot avatar eyes. You look through the camera in 3D software. You look through a GoPro. Your head is a camera. And so I paint in there. And I feel like I'm painting, and it has this tremendous gestural quality and fluidity. I make it sort of like I'm painting with watercolors. And so all of the wallpapers are hand painted, but simulated hand painted. So that's one quality. And the other one, you were asking about post photography. And yes, I think the sense of reality that's given through post photography, where we use data, right? The data accumulated over years about physics, about optics, about the way the body works, the way muscles work, the way light reflects off of different materials. And we have vast amounts of data, but data is ephemeral. You don't see it. And then we build a simulation from the data, whereas the photographic age was materialist. You took, to prove that reality was real, you would take a fossilized imprint of light by a chemical onto a piece of paper, and this physical form was proof of the real. So I think we now have
the product.
Yeah, exactly. And so we feel post photo people, and I do think I am the age of photo people, but I started working with this stuff, and my proclivity was for fantasy. I was like, my thing is not reality. I never watch documentaries. I'm like I'm a fantasy fiction and fantasy everything person. So when this stuff, was invented, I was like, oh yeah, this is the real thing. And I think that this idea that realness is fluid. And what precedes realness is the information used to create a subjective kind of realness, depending on how you remix it. It's remix. Whereas
it's that representation, isn't it? Of representations of this.
Yeah. And I also think that, wait, I'm going to close this and put us back into realness. Or another kind of realness. Where are you?
I'm here.
Oh, now you're Spider.
Yeah.
I want to do something else too. All right, I won't. I'll be steady. So, I love the spider.
Yeah.
All right,
I like it too.
but I think this
I'm a
is
bit taller with the spider, I think.
yeah, and it's very relaxing also. But I think that the we have it's a generation gap about what's different. It is a different sense of reality. And because I started working with all this and I was the early computer person, I share a sense of reality also by my taste for fantasy with a younger generation. And I think that is significant in terms of how it resonates to have a parallel construction like of in Mozilla Hubs and in bitforms. So, right, that this seems more real.
Yeah, well, we're living in a disinformation, like, cultural kind of landscape, which is where the image is really the only proof of realness. And I think that kind of is interesting when you start looking at obviously how like social platforms are working, and then also sort of how I guess the promotional aspect of images within the digital landscape. So I feel like those things are all something I think perhaps where I'm experiencing a lot with like HERVISIONS and also and how our sort of paths cross is sort of really sort of I guess challenging these intersections of proofs of realness, I guess, or an image. The value of image, and here we are. I'm a spider, and you're a ghost. So there you go.
Exactly. So going back to that, I want to talk about the ruins is also an audio piece, and the audience can hear it, although we can't because we will cut it in after this when we do nonlinear editing. But actually part of the COVID experience was not just the idea of the simulation, but of the collapse of America, which was collapsing for a long time, but at a certain point it crystallizes. And so the Black Lives Matter resistance was inspiring to me, and also made me feel that it was time not just to look at the patriarchs of modernism, but also of America. So I looked at the history of failed utopias, and I looked for 4 patriarchs, and the audio track that you're all listening to is actually a collaboration between Edmund Campion, who is an amazing composer and also the director of the Center for New Music and Audio Technology at UC Berkeley. And he and I have collaborated in many mixed reality works that were using, we call it virtual chambers for chamber music. So we've been working with Unity and VR and live performance for the past 4 years, I guess. And so what I did was I recorded speeches by Thomas Jefferson. It was a letter to a revolutionary general on democracy. I recorded Walter Gropius's Bauhaus Manifesto. Thinking of the Bauhaus collapsing into hyper-capitalist products. So it's not just IKEA, but the utopianism of my generation, who believed that mass media, first TV and then internet, was going to be the ultimate democratization and freeing from marketplace, the high speculative market in the arts, and ended up being just as bad as we have seen, bringing us Trump and misinformation and extreme ideas about the self as product. And And then I did Henry Ford's Fordlandia, which he made a number of rubber factories on the Brazil Amazon in Brazil, and with the task of making tires for his cars. And he built facsimiles of Detroit suburbs. He employed indigenous peoples from the areas, and enforced a diet on them of, I mean, this is so surreal, it's unbelievable. Hamburgers, hot dogs, French fries, and donuts. They were also forced to look at newsreels every night of life in America, things like the World's Fair or just general lifestyle in America. And all of these factories failed, every one of them. The people ran away and they flopped. And then I used a text about Fordlandia, and then the final one was Jim Jones, which was something of my generation. I mean, I think everybody has heard the expression "drink the Kool-Aid." So this was this cult that ultimately committed mass suicide, but what they actually were an anti-communist hippie commune that was based on a lot of paranoid ideas about communists taking over America, and they ultimately committed suicide. So when you listen to the audio track, you hear this sort of descending level of madness in the way my voice, I both performed the voices and how Ed manipulated them. He made a ruined software in which he could play in a MIDI environment in real time the voices. And he made a 10-minute composition for this rendered 3-channel movie, but we plan on using it in real time as well. And the voices are more my voice when I'm speaking Thomas Jefferson, and it becomes more pompous as it's Walter Gropius, and the Mickey Mouse voice, the one that really sounds like an idiot, is Henry Ford, and then the Jim Jones is the devil. So I did that also as the Black Lives Matter resistance was really happening. I felt I couldn't keep making this piece or this body of work without making that part of it. So I reinterpreted even my own works because I worked on this show for 2 years. So that's about the music, which I think is, to me, setting the tone. When you come into the real life space, it's a music with the very powerful speakers that we got from Sinmat in the 4 corners of the room that give this atmosphere of sort of steampunkishness.
Yeah, there's some. Yeah, I really like the sort of temporal entanglement that enforces. Like there's it's rooted and anchored in the sort of the realities of time that coexisting while you were making this. So Claudia, I'd love you to introduce some images of the real version of the ruins. It's been fascinating hanging out in here with you in the virtual version.
All right, I'm gonna pop them on. These are actual photos of the real install. So let's see how I'm doing here. Okay. So I'm sure it's going to have some complications because it always does. So this is the actual real gallery. And part of it has a very stagey and artificial look, partially because I showed these were intended for LED projectors, and we were able to get some. and they're on stretch screen material. So it has a very uncanny feeling. And are you seeing this sculpture now?
Yeah.
So here, this is what it really looks like. This is the high resolution sculpture. And so here you see what it looks like in the real world. So before I had to make a low resolution painted facsimile, which I used in the ruins animation. But this I made, it's intentionally sort of cyborged or a mixed reality. So it's 3D printed and CNC milled, computer-driven mill, where I faked making it look old, and I also faked making it look carved so that it looked like craft. So this was, again, a sort of cyborg, half machine, half handicraft object. And this is as it looks also in the real world. And let's just click through. So that's real life. And I think the model is a scale model. It has certain distortions because a WebVR is very wide angle, the camera, and it makes things look different. But it's close enough, and somehow it's the knowing, it's the connection. The liminality is the bridge. And that's the place that I think art exists. And
well, I think that's a really great note to end on, I think. So thank you so much, Claudia. It's been a pleasure, as always, talking to you. And thank you so much for this evening. And thank you everyone else for joining us tonight. If you you happen to be in New York, the show is on till, is it the 20th of October? 25th?
I'm sending you hearts. That's from me. Oh wait, now I'm gonna send you hearts. All right.
So it's on so if anyone's in New York, they can go and see the show.
Until the 1st, November 1st.
It's been extended, November the 1st, Bitforms Gallery. Go and see the ruins if you're in New York, or come and hang out in the Mozilla Hubs. Experience the virtual simulation for yourself. Thank you, everybody, and take care. And we look forward to seeing you again sometime. Bye. Bye. Bye.